In the midst of life's trials, where the weight of despair and the harshness of reality often seem insurmountable, we find stories of hope and transformation that remind us of the power of faith and resilience. This is the story of Ben, a man who, despite facing overwhelming challenges, discovered an unexpected path to renewal and inner peace. From the depths of his struggle with depression and financial ruin, Ben's journey unfolds as a testament to the profound changes that can occur when we confront our darkest fears and open ourselves to the grace and support available to us. Ben's life, once marked by pride and isolation, began to shift as he encountered a moment of divine intervention that altered his course. Through his trials, he learned that true strength lies not in facing adversity alone, but in embracing the help and guidance offered by others and by a higher power. This story is not just about Ben's transformation, but also serves as a beacon of hope for anyone feeling overwhelmed by their circumstances. As we delve into Ben's journey from despair to hope, we invite you to reflect on your own challenges and consider how faith and support can lead to profound personal change. Join us as we explore Ben's path to renewal and discover how his experience can inspire and guide you through your own struggles. Benjamin Ben Calloway was a man of routine, living in the heart of a bustling city, but often feeling like a stranger in his own life. In his early 50s, Ben had spent decades working as a project manager for a construction company, overseeing projects with precision but little personal investment. His days were meticulously organized, starting with a 5:30 a.m. jog around the neighborhood, followed by a quick breakfast and then the commute to work. On the surface, everything seemed in place, but beneath that, a quiet dissatisfaction simmered. Ben's life was stable but uninspired. His marriage had ended years ago, and while he had remained close to his 2 adult children, their lives had taken them to different cities. He spent his evenings alone in a small apartment, often contemplating the paths not taken. Ben's friends were few, and their gatherings had become infrequent and perfunctory, filled with small talk rather than meaningful connection. His weekends, once filled with excitement and possibility, had dwindled into a series of solitary activities: reading, watching old movies, and tinkering with household projects. Ben had always been known for his calm demeanor and reliability, but those traits had become a double-edged sword. His dependability had turned into rigidity, his calm into apathy. Over time, the vibrant, adventurous man he once was had faded, replaced by someone who simply went through the motions. Ben's hobbies, like his once-beloved sailing trips, had fallen by the wayside, leaving him with a sense of emptiness that grew with each passing day. Despite his outward composure, Ben was increasingly aware of the void in his life. He had once dreamed of traveling the world, of learning new languages and meeting people from different cultures. But those dreams had been buried under the weight of responsibilities and routines. Now, as he stared out of his office window at the city below, he couldn't help but feel that time was slipping away, and with it, the chance to truly live. There was a restlessness within Ben, an unspoken desire for change that he couldn't quite articulate. It was as if a storm was gathering on the horizon, waiting to disrupt the carefully constructed life he had built. And though he didn't know it yet, that storm was about to hit. One evening, after another long day at work, Ben felt an unfamiliar heaviness settle over him. It wasn't just fatigue from the day's tasks. This was deeper, more persistent. He tried to shake it off, attributing it to stress, but the feeling lingered, growing stronger with each passing day. Ben began to notice changes in himself. Things that had once brought him joy now felt meaningless. Even his morning jogs, which had always cleared his mind, seemed like an insurmountable chore. As the weeks went by, Ben's mood continued to decline. He found it harder to concentrate at work, his mind wandering to dark, unresolved thoughts. He withdrew from social activities, turning down invitations from friends and making excuses to avoid family gatherings. This wasn't like him, but he couldn't seem to help it. The isolation only deepened his sense of despair. What started as a subtle shift in his mood soon grew into a full-blown battle with depression, a battle he wasn't sure how to fight. Ben's depression wasn't just a feeling. It was a physical presence that weighed on him day and night. He struggled to get out of bed in the mornings, his body aching from the effort it took to face another day. The once clear direction of his life had become muddled, and he felt like he was drifting without a purpose. The confidence that had carried him through decades of challenges was gone, replaced by an overwhelming sense of hopelessness. Yet, despite these overwhelming feelings, Ben's pride kept him from seeking help. He had always been self-reliant, believing that he could solve his own problems without burdening others. The idea of reaching out for help felt like an admission of weakness, something he wasn't willing to entertain. "I've handled worse," he told himself, pushing down the rising tide of despair. But as the days turned into weeks, it became increasingly clear that this was a battle he couldn't win alone. Ben was determined to overcome this on his own terms. He refused to acknowledge that he needed support, convinced that sheer willpower would see him through. But the more he tried to manage it alone, the more he felt trapped in a cycle of denial and suffering. Depression had wrapped itself around him like a thick fog, obscuring the path forward, leaving him to wonder if he would ever find his way out. Ben's pride kept him isolated in his battle against depression. He believed he could conquer it alone, without anyone's help. Yet, as the days grew darker, something unexpected happened. While rummaging through an old box, Ben came across a forgotten book, Practicing the Presence by Joel Goldsmith. It was a gift from a friend, one he had dismissed long ago, thinking spirituality was just empty talk. But now, for reasons he couldn't explain, the book seemed to call to him, as if it had been waiting for this exact moment. Curious, and with nothing to lose, Ben began to read. To his surprise, he found that Goldsmith had faced a struggle strikingly similar to his own. The author's path through depression and his discovery that connecting with God and the Word of God was the key to his recovery resonated with Ben. Although skeptical, Ben thought, "Why not? What do I have to lose?" He decided to explore the teachings, cautiously dipping his toes into Goldsmith's words and the Bible. As Ben started to engage with the book, he didn't expect any miracles. In fact, he barely noticed any immediate benefits. Meditation, a core practice in Goldsmith's teachings, felt impossible. His mind was too restless, overrun with negative thoughts. But there was something in the words that brought a small measure of peace, a calm that he desperately desired. Even though he wasn't achieving the same serenity that Goldsmith described, he felt drawn to continue reading. That glimmer of tranquility, however brief, was enough to keep him going, to make him believe that maybe, just maybe, there was something more here for him. Ben didn't embrace the practices fully at this point. He was too guarded, too skeptical. He approached them with caution, unsure if this path would lead anywhere. But the seed had been planted. Goldsmith's words began to linger in his mind, subtly shifting his perspective. He wasn't ready to admit that he needed help, but he couldn't deny the pull that the book had on him. It was just the beginning, a tentative step toward a journey he never thought he would take. Ben's life took an unexpected and devastating turn when the mid-sized tech firm where he had dedicated over 2 decades of his career went bankrupt. The company's collapse wasn't just a financial blow. It shattered his sense of stability and purpose. The firm, once a leader in innovative software solutions, had been hit hard by a series of poor investments and the sudden downturn in the tech market. When the news came, it was as if the ground had been pulled out from beneath him. As the company folded, Ben found himself facing not only the crushing weight of his ongoing depression, but also the harsh reality of unemployment. At his age, re-entering the job market felt like an insurmountable challenge. The job search was grueling, and the mounting rejection letters only deepened his despair. Each day, he grappled with the growing fear of an uncertain future, compounded by the knowledge that his experience might no longer be as valuable in a rapidly changing industry. The impact on Ben's personal life was equally severe. His relationship with his family, once a source of support, became strained. The stress of his unemployment and the lingering shadow of his depression created a rift between him and his loved ones. They were worried, and their attempts to offer comfort often ended in frustration and miscommunication. Ben felt increasingly isolated, unable to bridge the emotional gap that had formed between him and those he cared about. Amidst this turmoil, Ben's heart ached not only from the weight of his personal struggles, but also from the profound sense of loss and helplessness. The collapse of his professional life had not only affected his financial stability, but had also left him questioning his self-worth and place in the world. Each day became a battle, not just with the external pressures of finding a new job, but with the internal struggle of maintaining hope and connection in a life that seemed to have crumbled around him. As Ben faced these new challenges, it became clear that his journey was far from over. The reality of his situation forced him to confront the full scope of his problems, pushing him to seek out new paths and solutions he had previously resisted. The path ahead was uncertain, but it was through this adversity that Ben would begin to find the courage to confront his deepest fears and explore the possibility of transformation. Ben's life, already plagued by depression, became even more challenging with the company's bankruptcy. The collapse of the tech firm had not only stripped him of his job, but also left him grappling with a profound sense of loss and confusion. His daily routine, once structured around work and familiar tasks, now seemed chaotic and directionless. The comfort of routine was replaced by an overwhelming sense of aimlessness, and each day blended into the next in a haze of inactivity and frustration. The financial strain of unemployment was heavy. Bills piled up, and the weight of financial insecurity added to Ben's mental burden. He found himself unable to keep up with payments, leading to mounting debt and an ever-present worry about his future. Each overdue notice and each call from creditors served as a stark reminder of his deteriorating situation, deepening his sense of helplessness. The impact on Ben's family was profoundly distressing. As the financial strain of unemployment intensified, he found himself facing the grim reality of an overdue mortgage. His once well-maintained apartment, a spacious, sunlit condo in a desirable neighborhood, was now at risk of foreclosure. This apartment had been a symbol of his achievements, a tangible representation of his hard work and success. Losing it felt like losing a piece of his identity. The mounting pressure of potential eviction weighed heavily on Ben, making him feel ashamed and vulnerable. His divorce had already strained his relationship with his ex-wife, and the thought of asking her or his children for financial help filled him with dread. The embarrassment of admitting that he was on the verge of losing his home, his last remaining asset, prevented him from reaching out. His pride kept him silent, even as the threat of foreclosure loomed over him. Family interactions, already strained by his ongoing depression, became even more fraught. His children, who had previously been a source of joy and support, now looked at him with a mix of concern and confusion. The once warm and engaging conversations during family visits turned into uncomfortable silences. Ben's inability to share his struggles made him feel more isolated, as if he were drifting further away from those he loved. Social connections outside the family were also deteriorating. Friends who had once been a source of comfort seemed to retreat as Ben's demeanor grew, increasingly withdrawn and irritable. The shame and negativity that surrounded him created barriers, leading to strained interactions and a growing sense of isolation. It felt as though his social circle was shrinking, leaving him alone with his thoughts and fears. The combination of the financial threat to his home, strained family relationships, and the erosion of his social support network created a perfect storm of adversity. Ben found himself trapped in a cycle of self-pity and despair, struggling against the weight of his depression and the reality of his deteriorating situation. The challenges Ben faced seemed overwhelming, and the path to recovery appeared shrouded in uncertainty. The idea of overcoming his depression and rebuilding his life felt increasingly distant and unattainable. As he wrestled with the mounting pressures of impending foreclosure and strained relationships, Joel Goldsmith's proposal, outlined in the book Ben was reading, seemed like nothing more than a distant fantasy. The concept of spiritual transformation, so abstract and removed from his immediate reality, felt out of reach. Ben's faith in any possibility of escape or improvement waned with each passing day. He was drained, both physically and emotionally, and the weight of his struggles left him feeling powerless. The notion of a better future seemed almost laughable. With every difficult moment, thoughts of ending his suffering began to surface. The idea of ending this miserable life once and for all haunted him, especially in the quiet hours of the morning when he first awoke. These dark thoughts were becoming an unsettling companion, making the prospect of change seem not just improbable, but inconceivable. Desperate and running out of options, Ben had exhausted every avenue to prevent the loss of his apartment. He had sought loans from friends, visited banks, and tried various forms of credit, but nothing seemed to work. Each rejection deepened his despair, and the looming possibility of losing the one tangible achievement of his life weighed heavily on him. In a moment of anguish, Ben sat at his desk and opened the drawer, searching for a notebook. His eyes fell upon Joel Goldsmith's book, a gift he had long forgotten. Feeling an inexplicable urge to reconnect with the calming words of Goldsmith, Ben decided to open the book. Instead of picking up where he had left off, he opened it randomly, and the page he landed on spoke directly to his current crisis. Goldsmith's message was about the grace of God and how he provides everything we need. The words, filled with a promise of divine support, struck a chord deep within Ben. Initially, the idea of surrendering his problems to a higher power seemed almost absurd. But as Ben read further, he began to reconsider. If God existed, perhaps he could indeed provide a solution. Desperate for any sign of hope, Ben decided to trust in this notion and to turn his troubles over to God. He resolved to believe that if God could provide, then there might still be a way out of his dire situation. Ben's hope, however, was not immediately rewarded. The days that followed were marked by intense inner conflict and mounting pressure. His mind, clouded by persistent negativity and self-doubt, struggled to hold on to the flicker of hope he had found in Goldsmith's words. The practical realities of his situation seemed to overshadow his newfound faith, and the burden of his financial crisis and personal despair weighed heavily on him. The stress and anxiety reached a breaking point. Ben found himself in a state of constant emotional turmoil, questioning the validity of his recent decision to trust in a higher power. The idea of ending his suffering began to creep into his thoughts with alarming frequency. He was overwhelmed by feelings of inadequacy and failure, believing that he was beyond redemption and that his situation was hopeless. In the midst of this internal chaos, Ben's interactions with others grew increasingly strained. His ex-wife, once a source of support, became a symbol of his perceived failures. He couldn't bear the thought of admitting his need for help, feeling that doing so would only highlight his inadequacies. The emotional distance between them deepened, adding to his sense of isolation. As Ben grappled with these intense emotions, he faced a critical moment, a severe crisis of faith and mental stability. The weight of his problems seemed unbearable, and the prospect of finding relief felt like an elusive dream. Yet, it was in this crucible of despair that Ben had to confront his darkest fears and the harshest truths about himself. This was his pivotal moment, where he had to choose between succumbing to his suffering or finding a way to navigate through the storm. Yet it was on a Monday morning that Ben faced his greatest fear. He opened the mailbox to find an eviction notice, his most dreaded piece of mail. Overwhelmed by despair, Ben felt as though everything was lost. He saw no reason to continue. First, the woman he had always loved left him, taking their children far away. Then, the company he had devoted his entire career to had gone bankrupt, leaving him with massive debts and broken promises. And now, even God seemed to have failed him, not delivering on the promised providence. It felt as if Ben was so wretched that he didn't even deserve the free grace of God. In his deepest moment of hopelessness, Ben didn't hesitate. He climbed onto the ledge of his balcony without a second thought and jumped, not even looking down. The idea of ending his life seemed preferable to facing the crushing consequences of his defeat. He leaped, driven by the belief that death was a better escape from his overwhelming suffering. In his deepest moment of hopelessness, Ben didn't hesitate. He climbed onto the ledge of his balcony without a second thought and jumped, not even looking down. The idea of ending his life seemed preferable to facing the crushing consequences of his defeat. He leaped, driven by the belief that death was a better escape from his overwhelming suffering. Yet a miracle occurred. Despite living on the 8th floor, Ben didn't experience even 2 meters of free fall. He landed on a scaffold that had been set up to clean the building's windows that day, which happened to be precisely at the 7th floor. The unexpected fall was broken by the scaffold, saving him from a fatal plunge and giving him a second chance at life. As Ben lay on the scaffold, surprisingly unharmed by his fall, he felt an overwhelming wave of emotion. Despite the violent jolt of impact, the scaffold, which was vacant as the cleaners had not yet arrived, had cushioned his descent. The fact that he was unharmed seemed nothing short of miraculous. The scaffold, which Ben had never seen before in his building, appeared on the exact day he received the eviction notice. To him, it felt like a divine intervention, as if God had anticipated his desperate act and provided a safety net. Ben's tears flowed freely as he grappled with this profound realization. He had been on the brink of giving up, but now he saw this moment as a direct message from a higher power. The scaffold was not just a physical barrier to his demise, but a symbol of hope and a sign that he was still being watched over. This realization brought him an unexpected sense of relief and spiritual awakening. As he stood up, Ben began to observe the world around him with a newfound clarity. The familiar sounds of his neighborhood, the rustle of the wind, the chirping of birds, and the distant hum of traffic felt fresh and vivid. He felt truly present for the first time in his life. The chaotic noise of his former life had been replaced with a peaceful symphony of nature, grounding him in the present moment. This experience marked a turning point in Ben's journey. The near-death encounter and the subsequent realization that he had been spared gave him a renewed sense of purpose. It was as though he had been granted a second chance not just to live, but to transform his life and his understanding of himself. With this profound shift in perspective, Ben began to embrace the possibility of change and healing, recognizing that the treasure he had found was not material, but a deeper, more meaningful connection to his own existence and to a greater force guiding him. Ben recognized in this moment not only the grace of God that had saved him from certain death, but also the grace reflected in his son's love and generosity. Richard's willingness to help, despite their strained relationship, was a profound reminder that God's grace had always been present. Ben realized that it was his own selfish pride that had kept him from recognizing and accepting this grace. His survival was not only a second chance at life, but also a pivotal opportunity to change his approach to both his personal struggles and his spiritual beliefs. Richard convinced Ben to rent out his apartment and move in with him. The rental income would cover the mortgage and provide a small passive income. This solution not only relieved Ben of his immediate financial burden, but also allowed him to rebuild his life with the support of his son. Ben started to integrate the lessons from Joel Goldsmith's book into his daily life. He approached each day with a new mindset, focusing on gratitude and faith. The practice of turning to the divine grace he had come to believe in offered him a newfound strength to face his challenges. The eviction notice and financial struggles still loomed large, but Ben's internal shift allowed him to handle these issues with greater resilience and hope. Ben's life underwent a profound transformation after he moved in with his son, Richard. The transition marked the beginning of a new chapter, one that was starkly different from the despair and isolation he had previously experienced. Living with Richard provided Ben with a fresh perspective on his circumstances. The once overwhelming problems seemed more manageable in the context of a supportive family environment. The daily interactions with Richard and his family helped Ben regain a sense of purpose and belonging. As he settled into the new routine, Ben found himself rediscovering simple joys that had been overshadowed by his struggles. The warmth of family dinners, the laughter shared over movies, and even the quiet moments of reflection in Richard's home became sources of solace. This newfound sense of normalcy was a stark contrast to the isolation he had felt in his own apartment. Financially, the decision to rent out his apartment proved to be a lifeline. The rental income not only alleviated the immediate stress of the mortgage, but also provided Ben with a small, steady source of revenue. This financial stability allowed him to focus on rebuilding his life without the constant pressure of financial insecurity. Ben also began to actively participate in Richard's life, offering support and advice where he could. Their relationship, once strained by distance and unspoken words, began to heal. The time spent together allowed for open conversations and mutual understanding, helping to mend the emotional rift that had developed over the years. In the midst of this new chapter, Ben started to explore opportunities for personal growth. He engaged in community activities, volunteered at local organizations, and even took up hobbies he had long neglected. These activities not only helped him feel productive, but also provided a sense of fulfillment and connection with others. The journey wasn't without its challenges, but with Richard's support, Ben learned to navigate them with a renewed sense of hope. The love and encouragement from his son, coupled with the lessons learned from his near-tragic experience, became the foundation for Ben's gradual recovery and personal growth. As Ben adapted to his new life, he began to see his struggles not as a series of insurmountable obstacles, but as opportunities for transformation. The grace he once doubted was now evident in every aspect of his life. Through Richard's unwavering support, the stability provided by the rental income, and the simple, yet profound, joys of daily life, Ben's journey was a testament to the power of resilience and the importance of embracing help and support from those who care. As Ben settled into his new life living with Richard, he experienced a profound shift in his perspective. The peace and faith he had found through his renewed connection with God began to permeate every aspect of his life. His daily routine transformed into one of mindfulness and gratitude. Each morning, Ben would begin his day with a moment of reflection, immersing himself in the teachings of Joel Goldsmith and the Bible. This practice provided him with a deep sense of calm and purpose. Ben's newfound tranquility had a ripple effect on those around him. His interactions with Richard grew warmer and more genuine. The once strained relationship between them blossomed into one of mutual respect and understanding. Richard noticed a significant change in his father. Ben was no longer the man burdened by despair, but rather someone who radiated a serene strength and compassion. Ben woke up each day with gratitude, fully dedicated to his purpose of helping those who felt trapped and overwhelmed by their own problems. He was committed to encouraging others to seek help, explaining that the presence of God works through all of us and that we must open ourselves to receive support when needed. Ben's transformation from a man overwhelmed by despair to a beacon of hope and faith underscores the profound impact of personal growth and spiritual awakening. His journey reveals that even the darkest moments can lead to profound changes when faced with courage and openness. Through the trials of financial collapse, personal loss, and a near-tragic end, Ben discovered the true essence of grace and divine presence. The miraculous intervention that saved him and the unwavering support of his son led to a deep realization. The obstacles he faced were not merely external, but rooted in his own reluctance to seek help and embrace vulnerability. This insight allowed him to rebuild his life with newfound clarity and purpose. Ben's renewed commitment to helping others reflects his understanding that the path to healing and fulfillment is not a solitary one. By sharing his story, volunteering in the community, and encouraging others to seek help, he demonstrated that real change comes from within and is amplified by the support of others. His daily gratitude and dedication to guiding those struggling with their own challenges highlight the power of faith and human connection. Are you facing overwhelming challenges or feeling isolated in your struggles? Remember, Ben's story shows that even the darkest times can lead to light and transformation. If you're feeling stuck or hopeless, don't hesitate to reach out for help. Talk to a trusted friend, seek professional support, or explore spiritual practices that resonate with you. Sometimes the first step towards healing is the hardest, but it's also the most important. Are you willing to open up and share your difficulties with someone who can support you? Taking that step can be a powerful move towards finding the help and perspective you need. Embrace the possibility that support is available and that you don't have to navigate your struggles alone. Ben's life now stands as a testament to the possibility of renewal and growth. His journey reminds us that with faith, perseverance, and the willingness to seek and offer help, we can all find a path to a brighter, more connected future.